Ever wonder why some of the most successful executives on the planet end up shredding their own financial playbooks? It turns out surviving a crisis requires abandoning the traditional budget and adopting something known as a rolling forecast. For decades, companies have relied on the traditional budget. It's a highly detailed, static financial plan set for a fixed 12-month period. You write it, you lock it in, and you operate under the assumption that the global market will politely remain completely stable for the next year. Former General Electric CEO Jack Welch hated this process. He argued that sticking to rigid targets actually stifles creativity. In his view, the traditional budget drains the energy and big dreams out of an organization while completely hiding new opportunities. The fatal flaw in that rigid 12-month plan is that it cannot absorb a punch. The moment a sudden macroeconomic shock hits, like a massive supply chain disruption or a sudden tariff hike, those static assumptions instantly become a liability. Look at the 2008 global financial collapse. When the system broke down, the world's smartest companies found themselves completely paralyzed. Their painstakingly compiled business plans and cash flow forecasts were suddenly worthless, based on an economic reality that no longer existed. Most of these organizations had no internal process for recalculating their numbers on the fly. A static budget is essentially a printed map. If an earthquake radically alters the physical landscape, blindly following that old map is a great way to drive your business straight over a cliff. If the budget is an outdated map, a rolling forecast is a real-time GPS, constantly recalculating your route based on hazards in front of you. Instead of dropping off a cliff at the end of the fiscal year, a continuous rolling forecast maintains a consistent forward-looking window. Every month or quarter, you update the model, constantly projecting the next 12 to 15 months ahead. Because you aren't building a massive plan from scratch every year, the operational friction drops. Elite finance teams have driven their forecasting cycle times down from several grueling months to just 3 days. This speed allows for driver-based forecasting. Rather than anchoring predictions strictly to past results, the system feeds on real-time metrics, things like sudden category growth, shifting market share, or incoming supply delays, allowing the business to instantly model future scenarios. Ultimately, a rolling forecast separates corporate visibility from rigid performance evaluations. It frees senior management from arbitrary targets and lets them prioritize agile strategic survival. To keep that financial GPS accurate, it requires an internal sensor network known as variance analysis. This is the continuous process of comparing your actual, real-world performance against the newly forecasted expectations. The mathematical logic here is straightforward. You subtract your planned results from your actual results. That difference is your variance, and it's split strictly into 2 outcome branches, favorable or unfavorable. Using those exact terms is critical. If expenses come in higher, that's negative. But if revenue comes in higher, that's positive. Standardizing the labels favorable and unfavorable eliminates operational confusion across the company. But identifying that variance is only step 1. The real goal is management by exception. By flagging the most significant deviations, leaders can ignore the noise, isolate the root causes of a problem, and trigger an immediate strategic pivot before a small loss turns into a catastrophic failure. You might assume that a system this responsive relies entirely on software algorithms. In reality, the most accurate forecasts depend on direct, unmediated human intelligence. Companies achieve this through the competitive testing of forecasts. They pit their traditional, top-down algorithmic predictions directly against bottom-up estimates gathered from their own frontline staff. This chart illustrates the principle. By collecting independent opinions across a business, pessimistic and optimistic outliers cancel each other out, forming a bell curve that zeroes in on the truth. Focusing on this center aggregate outperforms expert calculations and bakes in ground-level market realities. When you combine the raw processing speed of a digital forecasting system with the collective intuition of your own employees, you create an adaptable financial architecture that machines alone simply cannot replicate. However, there is one behavioral flaw that can instantly corrupt this entire system, and it all boils down to human self-preservation. If you tie your employees' financial bonuses and performance targets directly to the numbers they submit for the forecast, you guarantee a systemic failure. When incentives are linked to projections, forecasting stops being an exercise in truth and becomes an exercise in office politics. Employees will inevitably sandbag the data, submitting artificially low expectations to ensure they can easily clear the bar and secure their payout. To fix this, organizations must completely separate the forecasting process from the incentive process. The goal of a forecast is absolute visibility, while performance evaluations must be reserved strictly for the actual results delivered. Take the Danish petrochemical company Borealis. When they implemented a rolling forecast, they moved all target and reward evaluations into the hands of a separate quarterly review committee. Almost immediately, their internal forecasts adjusted into a highly realistic view of upcoming project expenditures. To navigate today's economy, you have to abandon the illusion of the static annual plan, adopt continuous, real-time forecasting, and focus on securing your organizational survival. Because when a crisis hits, the market simply does not care what you wrote in your budget.